Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I'm the author of 12 books, a CEO of 13 years, a founder of a startup set on data privacy, most importantly an elite performance coach of over 19 years, having worked with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia. Most excitingly, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance, specifically behind how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. My work includes everything from mitigating injuries to conditioning behaviors that set a player up long-term for the long game towards a top 10 tennis ranking. I'm behind theories from the optimal performance theory, optimal behavior for optimal performance, the barrier breaker, the rule of transference to the golden rule. As has become custom, each episode we dive into the latest rankings and results on the WTA and ATP tours and deliver new data implications as shared in my latest release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking, with over 80 episodes to date. Today's insights and key topic plays its own role, like so many other episodes, in developing the player, parent to coach for that road ahead towards a top 10 tennis ranking. So, as always, buckle in and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you've been with us for some time now, I have some exciting news for you today. And if this is one of your first episodes you're tuning into, you're just in time. And the biggest news for today is that it is 1 year since Beyond Top 10 Tennis came to air, which is really exciting, and I've decided to go with a little bit of a change of pace for today's episode, which is essentially going to be all around a recap from where we were 1 year ago to where we are today. And I'm going to intertwine throughout these snippets some key insights, I will say scattered throughout, to really showcase, I think, the depth and the platform that we set 12 months ago when my latest release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking, was being built in tandem with each and every episode, which adds, I think, a new dimension to that, because for the first 6 to 8 months of Beyond Top 10 Tennis, I had to keep that under wraps. And as you all know, this year we've taken on a new change of pace to really dig deeper into rankings and results, various correlations with player metrics, to really, I think, share front and center these new live insights, which is really exciting. Today's episode, then, believe it or not, 1 year, and it's number 85, which we have come, oh my goodness, such a long way. So if you are listening and you are tempted to track back to those very early episodes, bear with us, because they were, I think, very clean cut, but also very different in some way, shape or form from where we are today. And I'm really proud of that, and I can't thank each and every one of you enough. So with that, I wanted to answer a question that came in this week. So we do get them from time to time from you, and thank you so much. Though this week I wanted to, I think, specifically share this question because it's marking that 1 year, which is really exciting. So we've got Kyle S to thank for this. I'm really wanting to know, there are 2 questions here around Swiatek and updates, as well as Swiatek looking potentially to win the French Open, as well as de Minaur for the upset to win the French Open. So that's directly come from Kyle S. And to chime in, I think if you've been listening to our last couple of episodes, but primarily I track back to at least probably the last 20 or more that have really showcased key progressions and those metrics. So without a doubt, Swiatek is on top. But we really need to remember Rybakina is close behind. Now, I'm sure a lot of you would be wondering why I haven't said Sabalenka. And that's because when we're looking at the data and we're looking at the metrics, key patterns of play, and we've touched on, I guess, these words and various connotations throughout this season to date, Rybakina's performance is almost parallel with Swiatek. Swiatek, of course, is ahead in the rankings. Rybakina is very close behind. And you would have noticed in Madrid, Sabalenka and Rybakina's match was super close, which was really exciting to see. And even though Gauff is ranked ahead of Rybakina, and she has that chance to latch on to potentially the number 2 ranking this coming fortnight, depending on her performance and Sabalenka's performance, Swiatek is still going to keep that number 1 ranking. Rybakina is still going to keep that number 4 ranking. So we really have all 4 of those players in the mix, but really when we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, if we're looking at consistency, key patterns of play, both of these players are very close. So Rybakina and Swiatek. Swiatek, of course, is coming out on top, but it's not by a significant milestone as potentially the rankings highlight. And without a doubt, I would absolutely love to see Swiatek capitalize on that, and for her performance against, say, the likes of Sabalenka, Gauff to Rybakina to be even more extended. But that's not the case recently, where we're getting some really tight matches. And to be fair, Sabalenka did have championship points against Swiatek in Madrid, which means it could have gone either way, and maybe this discussion will be somewhat different, really pinpointing Sabalenka starting to peak again, because of course Sabalenka won the Australian Open, got her 2nd slam to her name, and then throughout the first quarter of this season, her performance really has lulled in comparison to, I really need to underscore this, in comparison to Swiatek and Rybakina more specifically. Gauff is actually not, I'll say, at that level. She's somewhat behind there when we're looking at results, implications at level of performance. So we can look at Sabalenka starting to peak again in Madrid, which is really good timing come the French around the corner. So this week in Rome is going to be very interesting. By all accounts, Swiatek really could fall off because she has been under the pump at such a high level, or she could keep going. But there's a very careful line here. We don't want to enter the French somewhat exhausted. So it's an art form, and we've got episodes on periodization and planning that appropriately. So we can only hope her team has planned that appropriately. In all fairness, though, we've got the likes of, say, a Serena, Nadal, Djokovic, to Federer, that over the years have been able to maintain that level consistently. So without a doubt, we know Swiatek can maintain this level consistently. But I still need to give that word of warning that we do experience those momentary lulls. Sinner, for example, has had to withdraw, and also, whether it was from Madrid to now Rome, to monitor that hip. And we've had a couple of withdrawals So it's really about maintaining a player's overall health and to see if we're all at the same baseline and we can lift that level, we're going to place Swiatek ahead. But if you closely watch that match, it really was towing the line, where it was really 1 and 2 in the world in the Madrid finals. Swiatek, Sabalenka, very close. It's probably the best I've actually seen Sabalenka play. Even better from her Grand Slam finals, without a doubt, because she was playing Swiatek, and it actually was really impressive, which means to say, if, for example, the French comes and it is Sabalenka and Swiatek in the final, of course, Swiatek will have the edge because she has been there before. But Sabalenka was very comfortable in Madrid, so that would definitely be a 3-setter and very close. That potentially could go either way. So there is that word of warning, bit of caution there, that of course, yes, Swiatek has that potential, but let's keep our radars open to see how Sabalenka is tracking, because she has come out of the blocks in the last 2 weeks. Rybakina on the same front is very dangerous, potentially not as dangerous on clay, but she has also been progressing. Gauff has reached the French Open final before. Let's see how she tracks in Rome, because if she ends up going deep, semi-final, finals, she's definitely primed to potentially reach semi-final, finals of the French, all 4. Now, we can't write Jabeur off, because even though she has not been performing in line with her top 10 ranking, we need to remember she has made 3 Grand Slam finals, I think in the last 2 to 3 seasons, potentially the last 2. I was looking at that data only yesterday, and although she has started this season really slowly in comparison, it's definitely one to consider on clay specifically, irrespective, with those finalist appearances being, I think it was Wimbledon twice and the US Open. So there we go. So that's a really interesting, I think, question to throw out there, and I'm sharing a little bit more let's say obtuse insights is to complement that. Potentially, yes, of course, Swiatek would be favoured. She'll definitely go in there as a number 1 seed. However, I really wanted to showcase the potential threats that are a reality given Sabalenka's recent performance and Rybakina's results as well so far this season. De Minaur, definitely that would be incredible. That said, De Minaur's reached somewhat of a plateau, which is not a bad thing. He's been hovering around 10-11 in the world so far this season. He is holding his own. He's not regressing, unlike a number of other players around that ranking range. Tsitsipas regressed out, then all of a sudden he regressed back into the top 10. Same with Rudd. De Minaur has been holding his own around 10-11, slight fluctuations, but there are a number of other players who have been inside Fritz, for example, and then regressed outside. But being able to hold his own means De Minaur has established this baseline now that's really solid, and he is ripe to build on that to take it to the next level. So hopefully he has that capacity to nudge, say, really deeply inside the top 10 to say an 8 or 7. I would absolutely love to see that. That said, does his game really threaten the current top 10? I will say only maybe 50% of the time. I would love to see that increase, but he's very lucky if it is 50% of the time. It's give or take there. Whereas you have the likes of an Alcaraz to a Sinner to a Djokovic, even Zverev and Medvedev, which it's probably like 70% of the time they are up there. Depending on the surfaces, Rudd and Tsitsipas are more highly favoured on clay at the moment so far this season, with both of them starting the season relatively slow. Okay, that's a lot, and we can really dive into that and those metrics, I think, potentially later on, but we have dived into that in previous episodes. But today I really want to kick things off. Let's recap where we've been and where we're going, and to really, I think, celebrate this 1 year. And I think if you are new, it's really going to showcase how far we've come with this various topics, and some of them you may wish to track back to and dig deeper into, really, I think, better, ascertain the roots of it all. If you have been with us for some time and you have been following from the very beginning, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. We would not be here without you. But the very, I think, key and important reminders to remember or recall, and especially from a performance standpoint, it's always helpful to head back and listen to some of those episodes to really kickstart, I think, those aspects of your game if that's what you have been working on. All right, all the way back to almost, I'll say 12 months ago, because despite it's 1 year today since Beyond Top 10 Tennis did come to air, our initial episode did not come, or was not live, until I think roughly a week later. So we had Welcome and the coach-parent relationship. This was actually a really rough episode. I was super nervous because it was the very first, and I thought it had to be really clean-cut and regimented, and I won't go into the details of how let's say critical I was of the content. That said, not enough was shared, I think, in this episode about the dynamic of the coach-parent relationship. The chapter in The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, which is essentially the text that the first 50 plus episodes were based on, it really went into the coach-parent relationship, but it cannot be underrated. I would encourage, despite its early start, each and every one of you to head back to that, but more so the book, to dive into The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, because the coach-parent relationship is incredibly interesting, it's incredibly important, and incredibly powerful. There's so much more I could say on that, but I will hold back, though I would encourage each and every one of you, if you do have a question about that, I'm more than happy to answer it, because irrespective of you're that player, the coach, or the parent, there is a role that can be played, and the parent is also an open term, because it can potentially be an aunt, an uncle, a guardian, so it's just a name place, but it's really powerful and applicable. All right, next we had hiring and firing your coach. It's probably one of the most controversial episodes, but also chapters that are written in my books, though it's so, I think, applicable, because there's this whole power tussle we talk about, and I absolutely love it, where you are a 12, 13-year-old and your coach is potentially 25, 30, maybe older, they could be 50, 60 years of age, and you just listen to them because you expect them to be right all the time. But we flip the script and go, well, actually, in fact, you are their employer. They are your employee. So you actually hold the power. You're paying the bills. You are paying them for their service, which means you have every right to get out of them what you want. And when we're looking at what do you want to get out of them, we're going, what is your lesson? What is the intention of your lesson? What do you want to work on this week? Are they working with you? And I'm really, I think, passionate about this, and why I've built AIMA International, why we have our subscriptions available, to say, I'm here to talk with you, and each coach should be available to talk with you, engage with you. But also, there's a very, I think, big misconception around needing that coach by your side each and every time you step on the court. Because at the end of the day, when you go to play a match, you are independent. They are not allowed to, well, all the time, tell you what to do and how to play, etc. Of course, you're going to walk on the court with a game plan, but we also want to build independent thinking. So when you're under pressure, you have the tools to figure it out. So the problem-solving skills. Now, all of this is built over time. So it's that 10-year pathway. And ideally, you want a coach you can hold on to and build a wonderful relationship with. But you might say, well, I don't have one. That's okay. It's never too late to start. More often than not, it's actually problematic for players who stay with the wrong coach. It's about finding the right coach. And with the right coach, you can achieve success, whether it's in 2, 3, 4 years, it could be in 6, 7 years, it could be in 6 months. But there's so much to it. We look at building those technical parameters, those foundations. And one of the easiest signs to know if you have the right coach is a really simple question. Do you know the 8 keys? What are the 8 keys? Can you teach me the 8 keys? Because more often than not, probably 99.9% of coaches do not know. And that is why there's such a significant separation between the best in the world and those who are striving to head towards a top 10 tennis ranking. It's an incredibly interesting discussion and one I'm so passionate about. And again, I really would encourage those questions to come on through, because I really do look forward to, I think, addressing this in more over time. And I have no qualm in that respect, because I'm a very firm believer that tennis coaches really need to uphold the highest standards and values. And unfortunately, let's say at the developmental level, that's not always the case, but also at that high performance level where a lot of players are potentially misguided, where they say, yes, I can get you towards a top 10 tennis ranking, and then all of a sudden $50,000 has passed hands within 6 to 12 months and the player has only slightly progressed. And it's really a discussion of going, why? What are the issues here? What do we specifically need to work on? Are these key expectations being met? So for the players out there, what are your expectations? What do you want to work on? Is your coach working on that with you? Are you seeing those incremental improvements? Are you getting homework? Are you getting that independent thinking built in? Are you being taught to think for yourself in those match conditions? Do you know what to do under pressure? So really, I think simple questions there, but they're very tangible, irrespective if you're based or ranked inside the top 10, top 20, top 100, top 500, irrespective, that there still are specific rulers, I think, that govern that coach-player relationship, and also where that coach-parent relationship can come in, and also then why hiring and firing your coach is actually a really healthy discussion and really important, I think, to dig into. Okay, following we had talent identification. Does it serve its purpose? I'm going to leave this one to tune into this episode, and I'll be really brief here because really short, really simple is no. You can disagree with me, and I really would encourage you to listen to that episode, because talent identification, I think, is a really poor system which is not built to serve these athletes that are up and coming. Talent identification is essentially looking at 8, 9, 10-year-olds through to, say, 14, 15-year-olds, and then they're cut off. So when a player is in that high performance stage, it's almost identified that they're too old or they're not good enough, when they're actually in fact peaking, and there is a very poor understanding of the trajectories here. And more often than not, unfortunately, those responsible for talent identification do not have, let's say, a science-based background with that doctorate that underpins underpins, let's say, key mechanics, the drive, and what it really takes? Or do they take that player aside to have a discussion because results are not the be all and end all? And one of my favorite examples, well, there's two here that I remember. Federer, for example, lost 0-0 so much in his earlier career, he probably would have been wiped off from talent identification. I have no idea if he was a part of that or not. The other two, which are very clear, we've got Serena and Venus, who opted not to play. We all know the story. Juniors, they wanted to hit pro sooner rather than later, but we know from the storylines how they were held back, how they just wanted to focus on their craft, and they didn't want to keep playing under pressure and, let's say, outdo themselves before they were able to peak. It's a really smart decision and one I'm very invested in, because when we're looking at statistically, and there is a bit of an anomaly here, because I did read something only yesterday about, I think it was Fritz, Wolf and Paul from memory on the ATP tour, who all are currently, I know two of them are ranked inside the top 20. I'm not too sure where Wolf's standing or his ranking is at this stage. I'm confident he is inside the top 100. I do not have the rankings set right now. But where I'm going with this is that they did have success at the Junior Grand Slam level, and they have had success on the Senior Tour, I think, in different, ways. Obviously, Fritz is number one there, where he's really been able to hone his craft. Paul is shortly behind. Wolf's done quite well, and I'm pretty sure it's those three. If it's not, I really do apologize. But the example here is that they were able to go quite well at juniors, win a junior slam, transfer that onto the senior tour. However, none of them have won a grand slam at the senior level. None of them have reached a grand slam final at the senior level. Where I'm going is, when you are pressured so much in talent identification to win junior grand slams, more often than not, that does not correlate with actual senior, if you like, grand slam results. We see a lot of players that are overworked in those developmental years, in their adolescent years. They hit the WTA ATP tour, all of a sudden they're ranked inside the top 100, and they're stuck. They hover. Their ranking hits a plateau where they do not progress because they are done, they've hit their peak, and they're just holding on. Another discussion that's really rich in content. Also noteworthy is that I think the first at least 40 to 50 episodes were actually relatively short in comparison to where they are now, because I wanted to make sure they were bite-sized, where they were around 30 to 40 minutes roughly of really jam-packing as much as I could into them. And then I think over time, after we found our groove, it was really about giving more to the point where I had to wrap things up. And so it's actually a really good discussion, I think, or a window to dive into these earlier episodes to also, I think, recognize where the pace did change. Okay, following this one is mental health, depression and anxiety in sport, is invisibility and how coaches can help. This was really powerful. At this time a year ago, I was a chairperson of mental health and not-for-profit board, and it was a very rewarding experience, very eye-opening. There are a lot of, I think, complexities involved in this respect. So this episode was very close to my heart, because I think most athletes, especially now more than ever, do experience depression and or anxiety in some way, shape or form, and even adults we know do experience depression and or anxiety as well, and more often or not it's undiagnosed and unrecognized. And I'm a very big proponent for being able to identify if you are going through one of these let's say, ailments, and being proactive and getting, I think, the help you need, finding the resources and doing what's right for you, what's helpful for you. There is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach here. So that is definitely a powerful one, food for thought. Following this one was player behavior. Yes, it's your responsibility as their coach. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen, let's say, players' behavior just get away with it. And what I mean by this is you have the very old school approach of throwing rackets and swearing to being really upset, just really poor behavior. I won't get into the nitty-gritty details. And essentially, this is where a player is asked that they leave the court. That is not appropriate behavior, and how we build those well-rounded individuals that do not behave like 5-year-olds on a tennis court at the Grand Slam level. This all roots back to that behavior, and I think that key circle that they are around, and whether I think these behaviors are condoned or encouraged. So it's a very interesting conversation, and why the parent is encouraged to be involved here to ensure you're picking the right coach to help shape that player as they're evolving. Because you really need to remember as well, if you are looking at tennis seriously, you potentially are spending 10 to 20, 25, maybe even 30 hours a week for when you're really serious, potentially with that coach training. That's an incredible amount of time. And especially for the parents and the guardians out there, really ask yourself if that's the type of person behavior you want your child to be around. Hopefully the answer is yes. If the answer is no, track back then to the hiring and firing your coach and have a really healthy discussion around that. Okay, this is followed by mental stability, helping athletes cope with performance. I think this is one for everyone because there's so much pressure, and it's managing. It's not just the depression and anxiety just touched on. Helping athletes cope with their everyday life, with their performance, with those wins and or losses in a really healthy way is really important. And I can't stress this enough. I know personally, when I was a player, this is something I really struggled with. I'd get really angry and upset at myself if I lost. And it was almost encouraged back then that, yes, that is acceptable behavior. You should be really upset with yourself, rather than that coach coming over to me and going, hey, you know what? Did you learn something? What do you think worked well for you today and what didn't? Okay, so next lesson, let's work on these 3 key pointers to progress you, which is so much more helpful than beating yourself up and going, maybe I'm no good, maybe I should give up. Please do not have that attitude. Please go with that 3-step approach, please. All right, performance expectations, where do you stand? This really ties into the previous episode and how we're looking at what are you expecting of yourself? What level are you looking at? What are you building before? And it's really an introductory discussion around your baseline and how we've touched on that in multiple episodes. Continued learning. How do coaches continue to learn after they have become a coach? Really powerful, because the answer here is more often than not, they do not. And why the majority of coaches do not have access to the 8 keys. If they do, it means they've been upskilling, because as 8 keys have only come to life in the last couple of years, despite it being heavily researched across the last, 12 years. So if you have a coach and they're 30 years of age, you want to make sure that they're really onto this new content to push their player towards the top 10. If they're 30, 40, 50 years of age or older, you want to make sure they are continuously upskilling through different areas, different content, not just say a coach education provider, because believe it or not, coach education providers do not have access to the 8 keys. I've touched on this previously, where AIMA International specifically opted to make sure the 8 keys were available to you. Everyone, irrespective of where you're based in the world, in contrast to exclusively just a coach education provider, and that's really important. Jarring the body in sport. Is my child getting injured? That is really important. It's an episode incredibly close to my heart. We've got books on this around developing the athlete, and specifically the text, so The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success. It really dives into this, but more so to look at how you can safeguard your body, learning correct technique at a younger age, because believe it or not, most athletes, most tennis players are not learning correct technique, and they do suffer long term because of that. Recall though, all of this ties into our later episodes. These are very early episodes, and how they've set that baseline, that benchmark, to why now we're talking about, and we can with more freedom, the current results and rankings on tour. All right, how to avoid adolescent injuries, coach responsibilities, really closely tied to the previous one, okay, when we're looking at jarring the body, because we can look at how to avoid injuries, and it is a coach's responsibility, essentially by educating yourself, being conscious of those 8 keys, understanding the basics of technical mechanics, where the 7 keys come into play to allow that 8th key to amplify the 7 keys. The What Is Your Game Missing series. What is your game missing? What is your game missing now? And what is your game missing to win are really powerful around this. Motivation of the right kind for athletes. Motivation, I think, is somewhat of a buzzword, unfortunately, these days, but when we're in the sporting spectrum, motivation is essentially habitual. It is an intrinsic, I think, motor in different ways or forms. And if you really need to motivate an athlete every single time on court, maybe they shouldn't be there. If, however, you have that drive and that passion for the game, of course, this is where your home is. That said, we still need to, if you are that coach or even as that parent, find ways to motivate indirectly to support them. And that is incredibly powerful in and of itself. Athlete development, accommodating the growing body, really important, because when you get from, whether it's that 10, 11, 12-year-old, you go through adolescence, you go through those growing pains, and we know we've all been there, the adults are listening. But if your technique is not modified at this stage, if your game is not modified, if the load is not modified, and there's so much more to this, the kinetic chain, if no modifications are made, you are susceptible to injuring yourself and sustaining long-term injuries. If it is modified with your growth to align with your performance and how your body is moving and those pains to support you, that is a good and healthy baseline to help you build upon that, get you through that with good performances, and then progress with your ranking. Rate of progress, is timing everything the sister factor? This is really interesting. I'm not going to give too much away here because the sister factor is really powerful, and we're looking at, let's say, cross disciplines, various sports, and how they can compound your own performance, your own game. Mindfulness away from the training grounds. This is really important, and I know I say that a lot because there's so much that really honestly is important, and why there are so many books. That's 11 books essentially, and this is just one of them with really powerful, I think, reminders and aspects to integrate into your game. But mindfulness, it comes in varying shapes and forms. It's unique to, I think, most people, most individuals, but this episode really looks at mindfulness, where a player or athlete is encouraged to enjoy themselves away from the tennis courts, to find that other that they enjoy. It might be video games, it could be riding their bike, it could be skateboarding. Irrespective of what that is, it's encouraging that other and a sister factor in a really healthy way. But then mindfulness and how it is correlated then with that sister factor and can compound the game, but in a really fun and enjoyable way, because we don't want to forget at the end of the day, kids are kids. Children are children, irrespective. If you are that 19-year-old, that 16-year-old, I know that you still have that child there. We know as that player athlete does age, so you get that 21, 22, you are still a young adult, and that's still that fun should always be there. And we want to find ways for you to keep having that fun and how it's able to complement your performance. Balance. Remember to take time for your non-sporting self. This is tied in then to mindfulness, and it's balancing the two. So without elaborating on balance, I'm going to track and encourage you to tie those two together, mindfulness, and then have a look at balance and taking time just for you. Supplements. Is there a place for them in athlete development? Really interesting, I think, for especially the coaches and parents out there, even for yourselves, to really understand the benefits and potential non-benefits of supplements. And this is something that I think when we're looking at education, coach education, player education, this is very void from the literature, but very, I think, interesting and important to be mindful of. Functional movement, center of gravity, that's 1. Functional movement, range of movement, that's 2. Functional movement momentum is 3. Functional movement power is 4. And I think the following one is functional movement and balance to make 5. All right, all 5 of those episodes is actually when our episodes are starting to get a little bit longer, let's say above that 35-minute mark. But all of those 5 episodes work in tandem. They're teaching you those core basics of technical parameters, your technique, your prowess, the building blocks to establish really healthy foundations in the developmental high performance stage. So whether it's 8, 9, 10 years of age through to 17, 18 years of age, and then when you're ready to hit the ground running on tour, to track better towards the top 100 and to progressively make your way towards the top 50 and so on. But these 5 functional movement parameters are incredibly important. All right, single sport interaction. Is athlete engagement necessary? This tracks to one of the early episodes and ties into that when we're looking at tennis as an individual sport and how we can compound its results when we tie that in with other sports. And there is room, but be selective, find what you enjoy, but also you can look at, in Australian terms, soccer and football, so 2 different ones here in Australia, but then also whether it's surfing, skateboarding, netball, basketball, baseball, softball, all of those sports, and there's so many more that can be equally rewarding. I would say table tennis, badminton to squash for the tennis player are ones to potentially stay away from, only when we're looking at potentially compromising your technique. If you are really being, let's say, competitive. If you're just playing it for fun and being social, no problem with table tennis, probably no problem with badminton there, but squash is one to be a little bit cautious of. It's something, believe it or not, I was always cautioned of as a junior, as a player, and I actually to this day have never played squash. I think by no means socially. I think I have stepped onto a squash court a handful of times and played for maybe all of 5 to 10 minutes in fear that I could compromise my own technique. So that's a little bit of a fun backstory. However, look, if you find that it does not affect your game, by all means, go out there and have fun. All right, are you proud of yourself? Or what about tennis players? This is really for the coaches out there and asking you if you are proud of yourself and if this is being shared then with your players. If you are proud of your tennis players, if you're having that discussion with them, if you are delivering that positive feedback to them, because I can tell you firsthand how rewarding it is, even from a coach, to be able to share with one of my players how proud I am of them, but then also from that player's perspective, how meaningful that can be. That's a very good reminder this episode to really have a look at the feedback you're giving and how you hold yourself to share with those players the meaningfulness behind that, and really how they can look up to you and how rewarding it can be to hear that. All right. Why isn't your tennis player or athlete listening to you? It's not them, it's you. This is really fun because when we're looking at listening and being able to engage, more often than not, we are typically human behavior going to blame the other person. Whereas at the end of the day, the story we are telling, the message we are telling is typically a little bit too dry for the other person to remain engaged, and or they may not be understanding. So it's really important to make sure, I think, that level of engagement is there by having that conversation, including them in that conversation. So that is another episode, very important. Okay. The forgotten art of skill development in athletes. Very important. One of my favorites. Most of these are my favorites. This is how passionate I am about Beyond Top 10 Tennis. And this is really why the books and these chapters, these key segments featured in our episodes. And I'm sure we will get to a point where we do track back to this type of format when we do have, let's say, quieter periods on tour. But all of this work to date and all of these episodes, this is why it's laid, let's say, the benchmark for now, and why I really do encourage each and every one of you, every episode, to have a look at our earlier episodes to really better understand where we're coming from. Because if you understand all of this work behind us, it really frees us up to talk about the now and to better understand and interpret the data now. To when I share about different rankings and correlations and baselines and metrics, why a player really isn't progressing, why a player is regressing, and we can look at a simple skill even at the level of a top 100 player, the forgotten art of skill development. What discrete skill needs to be worked on? What serial skill has been falling through the cracks? Which brings us to the following episode, which is discrete and serial skills, restoring and relearning movement. Really important, and I think is really applicable to last week's episode with the discussion around the rule of, say, 10,000. So track back to last week's episode to better ascertain, I think, what that's all about, and the power of restoring and relearning movement. And around, I'll say, these episodes and onwards, we dive in a bit deeper in that respect. Education and its role in aspiring athletes. Really important. Cannot stress this enough. I am absolutely, completely biased, having gone all the way through the highest you can go from primary, secondary, bachelor's, certificates in between, diplomas in between, master's, doctorate, and I'm still continuously learning. So I have to encourage this, but also more seriously, when we're looking at how a player retains information or how they're able to solve problems, we want to give them the skills. And the best way to give them these skills is to learn a variety of aspects, not just one-dimensional, but really have a look beyond your scope of reasoning. So look outside the box, to look what you can work on, and looking at different avenues. And I think what's really powerful here is how the 8 key keys, I think, overlap all of this. Learning the role of academia in sport. That's a good episode to tie into, especially, I think, the developmental high performance athletes, let's say between that 12, 13 years of age, say to 16, 17, where they're physically at school, or even if they're online in school, to really see how helpful the academia, so the academic side of their current schedule, does help their performance. What's your purpose? Tennis training with intention. And this tracks back to one of those very earlier ones I touched on, and when the episodes are really hitting a little bit over the 40-minute mark. And it's about when you step on court, why? What is your why? What is your reason? What are you working on? What is your intention? So whether it is with a hitting partner or with your coach, what is your reason? Now, if you do not have a reason, you do not know why specifically, then track back to the hiring and firing your coach. If you know, good, but dig deeper. What else do you want from today? If you're on court for the next 2 hours, what are you specifically working on? Some days you're just going to want to hit the ball, but still try and have an intention. Have a look at how many hits you're looking at going, where the momentum, what key discrete skill are you working on, what depth are you working on. Chuck a cone out there, put a pyramid of balls out there if you're looking for a target mark, but really look at your mechanics, work on your mechanics to fine tune them. So there are so many, I think, different use cases for this. It's essentially endless, but make sure that there is a purpose. Learning from mistakes, tennis players. I think that speaks for itself. It's very important. So irrespective of your result, your performance, mistakes were made, what are you learning from that? And this is really talking about how to go about that. Addiction and coaching, the tennis player. Maybe not what you think, but it's really powerful, the addiction and coaching for the tennis player to better understand, and really powerful, I think, for coaches and parents to know what players can deal with, struggle with. And I think no player is immune from this, especially between, let's say, 13 years of age through to, say, 23 years of age and beyond. But if we just focus on, let's say, that 10-year range, there's so much involved there and things to work on, focus on, and when the addiction and coaching discussion can really be incredibly important. How to coach the warm-up, an underrated necessity for tennis players. That's a good one. Looking at what you should be fine-tuning in the very earlier sessions. Okay, I'm going to quickly glimpse over the next couple of episodes, then wrap them all up. Sweat, what it tells you and what to look for in the tennis player. Hydration, coconut water, soda water, energy drinks, and sport drinks. Which one? All right, those two episodes, they tie together when we're looking at your hydration, your fluid intake. Very informative. Body image, self-worth, and tennis players, a coach's responsibility. Why should tennis players take time off if they become sick? The balancing act. Why are the top tennis players dropping like flies? Periodization. All right, those three. Body image and self-worth, very important. That is a must listen for each and every coach, player, parent out there. Predominantly the parents and coaches, that is an absolute must. When we're looking at taking time off, if a player comes sick, really important to understand this and to not beat yourself up if you do need to take time off. How to manage that. Periodization I touch on, I think, every couple of episodes, the peak performance cycles, how to develop them. This is an episode that set the foundation to better understand that. Okay, injuries in junior athletes, not just tennis, and how it is connected to their technique. Really important, and is tied back to our earlier discussions on injuries, techniques, because it's such a broad topic filled with, I think, so much content, right? Mentoring, and it's tied to the tennis player's success. That is powerful. Knowing for the coaches out there that your role as a mentor, really important. Respecting yourself as a coach. The training session that can't be missed. Is this the case every time? How to plan for the future. Guiding tennis players for success. Those 3 episodes, planning for the future, absolutely. The training session that can't be missed, that should be the case every time, and why, dives into it and how to make that possible. Respecting yourself as a coach, how powerful that is to ensure you are transferring that over to your tennis player and or players. Okay, the small things, happiness away from sport, fair play and ethics, win or lose, learning from mistakes, coaches. Okay, if you want your player to learn from mistakes, coaches, you need to learn from them as well. And your players will indirectly learn from you. Fair play and ethics. It does not matter the scoreline. Fair play and ethics should always win out. And the small things, happiness away from sport, that is a must. That is really, I think, a bit of fun, but equally just as important. All right, what followed here, because now we're up to, I think, around 50, because I wanted to be really quick there. We have parts 1 through 5, revisiting the coach-athlete relationship, and that's 5 episodes, and this is really where we went above 45 minutes and we hit that 50-minute mark in a lot of these ones, really showcasing, I think, the depth and where we've been, and having, I think, closed off the secrets to optimal performance success. These chapters were really powerful, but how when we're revisiting that coach-athlete relationship in various parts, we're looking at how they all tie together. So I think, if anything, if you're not going to listen to all of the previous ones, those 1 through 5 parts are absolutely essential reading to better, I think, understand the dynamics that are involved in building a tennis play, that where the 8 keys come into play, but also just that baseline, what's really a prerequisite if you're taking, I think, the long game seriously, if you want to progress towards a top 10 tennis ranking, and you're setting the foundations now, or over especially the next couple of years. Okay, I think the next couple of episodes were just as powerful, and I think this was the stage where we dived into the secrets to optimal coaching success. So a new book, which was really exciting. So we've got the new book, Fundamental Skills for Tennis Players, Problem Solving and Sport for Tennis Players, Reading and its applicability to sports performance in tennis players, and The Power of Song for Tennis Players. All 4 of them are really powerful, really important, because problem solving is a must. Fundamental skills is a must, and that ties back to the functional movement that we've touched on previously. Reading and its applicability ties back to the learning and the role of academia. So you can see these cross sections here and how everything is tied in, but we move to the next level where we have, let's say, that baseline level, and now this is teaching you to develop that next peak performance. But to develop that next peak performance, you are reliant on a new depth, a new understanding to be able to do so, and that's very problematic for players because they do not have that depth, they do not have that heightened reasoning or understanding to get them to that next level. So this is why these episodes are so powerful, because they inadvertently talk to you and teach you, expand, I think, your depth of reasoning, your understanding, and your education inadvertently as well, and directly, to really infuse itself in your own performance. And I think the power of song, it's really fun and interesting, and I wish more players would do this or more coaches would do this for their players, because there's absolutely a place for music and training and various songs and movement and patterns of play and behavioral connotations, and how you can coincide one element of a player's behavior and that outcome with a song to a certain beat and a certain rhythm. You can have so much fun with it, and I really would encourage each and every one of you out there, if you are not using your favorite song to enhance your performance, go ahead and do it and let me know how you go. Find potentially your next favorite song, a different artist, and a different element of your game, and learn how to mash them together to amplify your performance. There are a lot of, I think, very inadvertent ways you can use, I think, song to help your performance, and you bet there's research behind that, there is data behind that. And again, this is why these episodes are so important when we're looking at the latest results and rankings on the WTA and ATP tours. Age interactions, tennis players, persistence versus walking away, and gender interactions. All three of them are really powerful. Age interactions, learning that earlier on, because when you are on tour, it does not matter the age of your opponent. You could be a Djokovic, 36 going on 37 years of age, or you could be Maya Andreeva, who's just turned 17 years of age. There's a huge gap there where you are playing your colleagues 10 years, your senior and or junior, and learning to do so at a young age really puts front and center a player's performance opposed to their age, and rather as looking at it as a barrier, to just look at it as the player and their skill. Persistence versus walking away is very powerful. Knowing, I think this also ties into the discussion about performance, expectations, win or lose, because having that persistence, you really need to know where you're going and have that sense of direction, opposed to walking away, but knowing what's right for you. Gender interactions, mixed doubles. I think that's a given. Play more mixed doubles. Play more doubles, hand-eye coordination. Play more mixed doubles. Looking at that communication adds a very different dynamic to your game, especially in the juniors with more balls. Obviously, when you're at the senior level on tour, there's not always, I'll say, enough time for players to partake in those events. And some players are a lot more biased towards, I think, their singles over their doubles. And there are obviously very different reasons for that. Scheduling, performance, specific goals, ambitions, etc., tracking towards that top 10 ranking. But I think in the very earlier years, it's absolutely important, if you can organize your hitting partners as you are, I think, progressing, mixing with gender, it's equally important and powerful what you can learn. Learning through prior play for tennis players, note-taking pre and post performance, public speaking and self-confidence for your sporting self. All of these ones are in the Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success. So we've done the performance success, this is coaching success. So when we're tying these together, they're really powerful. Prior playing, remembering what you're learning, what you're working on, note-taking before and after, so you know what you're working on, what you're still working on, what you're fine-tuning, public speaking, and building that self-confidence, so when you do get to the stage and you do lift that title, irrespective if it's on your first year on tour, third year on tour, 10th year on tour, it does not matter. But honing those skills, especially at an early age, can be incredibly rewarding, especially for building, I think, those really important relationship with your peers on tour. Okay, inside our new book release and Finding Your Feet, Sporting Strengths for Tennis Players. This was the snippet where my latest release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking, was almost out. That's followed by the new book launch, Impact of Social Media and Surface Implications. We're really getting the nitty-gritty now with, here we go, new top 10 player and key surface insights for the 2024 season, markers for the top 10 and pressure between junior to senior for tennis players. All 4 of those episodes really wrapped up the end of 2023, believe it or not, and coincided with the release of my latest book, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking. And these were the final episodes, really, when we were looking at the Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, the Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success, and then we changed that pace because now it is the new year. It is the new season, 2024, when we really dived into the Australian Summer of Tennis. So those episodes that followed were Australian Summer of Tennis, focused on the Brisbane International, United Cup, and touch points on mental awareness. The same Australian Summer of Tennis, United Cup, Brisbane International, ASB Classic wrap towards the 2024 Australian Open. Really, I think, interesting insights over that hour. So we finally, beginning of this year, hit that hour because these episodes were so, I think, in depth, looking at those results, looking at those rankings, and we were still, I think, tying in parts of the secrets to optimal coaching success before the special edition of the Australian Open hit the airways, which was days 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's 3 different episodes there of the Australian Open that really, I think, shared those key, I think, those data implications, what was really going on. And that was followed by days 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 2 episodes there, but they're all over an hour long and really jam-packed with what really was going on at the Australian Open with the player's performance, who's tracking first, second, third round of 16, why a player was able to progress that far, and what was surprising, what wasn't, key expectations for a player winning and or losing. And I think reviewing those episodes and listening to them will give you some really powerful insights also on what it really takes to progress through a Grand Slam. Okay, we're up to the last dozen or so episodes, so I'll try and brush through them because they are more recent. And we've got top 10 tennis players, WTA and ATP tournaments, coach player dynamics, what's stopping more Grand Slam wins, and how to deliver. Tennis rankings on WTA and ATP tours, Abu Dhabi to Dallas, all those in between, plus Qatar Open and who's on the radar for the top 20 towards the top 10. Now, I think those 2 episodes speak for themselves because we've got all of those, I think, tournaments from what we've got: Dubai, Dallas, Qatar, the current tournaments, and we're looking at the coach player dynamics, which I believe we still digged a little bit into one of the books, so The Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success, before really, I think, going front and center and hedging on the latest results. Okay, top 10 tennis newcomers, players to watch, ranking highlights, WTA Tour, Qatar to Dubai Championships, ATP Tour, Amro to Mafel Open, and the sports science. So wrap that up in between. All right, we've got tour, okay, WTA and ATP ranking movers, results from Dubai to Qatar, players to watch, and understanding the data. I think that was one of my favorites there. Right, top 200, WTA and ATP insights, markers for the top 10, San Diego, Dubai, and more. This one was really interesting because I made the decision that week to really look at the top 200 rather than just the top 100. And what you had there was showing key markers that separated both the top 100 and the later. The official breakdown of the BNP Paribas Open at Indian Wells for WTA and ATP players, and on-demand top 10 tennis ranking data insights. The official wrap of the BNP Paribas Open at Indian Wells, finalising the results. Top 100 ranking insights, Charleston and Miami, baby. That one was a lot of fun. All right, the last couple of episodes, we've had the official insights on player results on both the WTA and ATP tours for the Miami Open. This was followed by the breakdown of player rankings at Miami, Charleston to Houston, more, followed by Charleston, Zurich to Houston plus Monte Carlo, top 100 rankings, which brings us to our final last 3 episodes to today. Monte Carlo, Billie Jean King Cup, Porsche Grand Prix to Barcelona, followed by the WTA and ATP rankings and results breakdown, including finalising the Porsche Grand Prix, Rouen, Barcelona and Madrid, to last week, the official WTA and ATP results from Madrid, Nadal's adios, Swiatek's climb, and what to expect come the 2024 French Open. And that has brought us all the way to today's episode, number 85, and to celebrate one whole year of Beyond Top 10 Tennis. Thank you so much for listening. Look, I really hope you enjoyed that summary, that wrap for today's episode, revisiting from episode 1 through to episode 84 and today's episode 85. I cannot believe how far we've come, but we wouldn't be here without you. To grab your copy of The Secrets to Optimal Coaching Success, which really was those last couple of episodes, head on over to AIMA International, or to grab your copy of The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, likewise, they're all available on AIMA International. And the same applies to grab your copy of my new release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking. You can find that also on AIMA International, and also likewise with all of my other books on Amazon. So irrespective where you're based in the world, you still can get your hands on a copy. For any comments or questions, head to AIMA International or Topic Thread, the social platform set on data privacy. To interact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis, head on over to Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. To catch up on our blogs, head on over to AIMA International and look for our blog tab, or head on over to Medium. And as always, I'll leave all the links in the episode notes. For something different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books, where my fictional release is. For something left of field, visit Spruik for some random polls. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, like, share, and all of the above would be absolutely phenomenal. For those of you who are interested, we do have scholarships available on AIMA International, as well as options to work with me exclusively to optimize your performance and to nudge you closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. So don't be shy, come and say hi. Look, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode, our change of pace, our recap, and celebrating 1 year with Beyond Top 10 Tennis. Thank you so much. On that note, thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful. I am your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.